They found Reaper's bike first, engine still warm, kickstand down neat as a Sunday prayer. But Reaper, our 6'4" sergeant-at-arms who'd taken bullets for this club and never backed down from any man, he was gone. And in a brotherhood where you bleed together or die together, gone meant only one thing. Someone inside had broken the sacred code. If you are new on this channel, please like, share, and click on the subscribe button. The Wyoming wind cut through the Iron Phantom's clubhouse like a rusty blade, rattling the windows and making the neon Budweiser sign flicker over the bar. I sat in the president's chair, a throne I never wanted but inherited when my old man took a sniper round outside Reno 3 years back and stared at the empty seat where Reaper should have been. 48 hours. That's how long Marcus Reaper Sullivan had been missing. Talk to me, Chains. I looked across the scarred oak table at our road captain, a grizzled veteran with more ink than skin showing on his forearms. Walk me through it again. Chains dragged a hand down his weathered face. His cut, the leather vest that was more sacred than any wedding ring, bore patches from 23 years of riding with the Phantoms. When he spoke, his voice had the gravel of a man who'd smoked too many cigarettes and swallowed too much truth. We rolled out Thursday morning, 6 bikes total. Simple run down to Casper to meet with the Diablos about that shipment route through their territory. He pointed at the map spread across the table, his finger tracing Highway 25. Reaper was riding sweep, keeping an eye on our 6 like always. We stopped at that truck stop outside Douglas. You know the one, with the waitress who's got a thing for junkyard. A few of the brothers cracked smiles despite the tension. Junkyard, our youngest patched member, turned red under his road-worn tan. We grabbed coffee, stretched our legs, maybe 20 minutes tops, Chains continued. When we saddled up, Reaper said he needed to make a call, said he'd catch up in 5. We figured it was club business, maybe checking in with one of his girls or handling something private. You know Reaper. He don't volunteer information unless you're bleeding out and need to know. I did know. Reaper had been my father's enforcer before becoming our sergeant-at-arms. The man was a ghost when he wanted to be, could make problems disappear cleaner than bleach on blood. He'd saved my ass more times than I could count, had taken a knife meant for me during that ugly business with the mongrels 2 summers back. So you rolled without him, I said, keeping my voice level even though my gut was churning. We gave him 15 minutes, Chains said defensively, then 30. I called his cell. Went straight to voicemail. We doubled back, tore that truck stop apart. His bike was in the lot right where he'd parked it. Keys in the ignition. Phone was on the pavement next to it. Screen cracked to hell like it had been stomped. But no Reaper, no blood, no signs of a struggle. Just gone. The room went quiet, except for the wind and the creak of leather as brothers shifted in their seats. 12 men around that table, all of us wearing the same 3-piece patch on our backs. The Iron Phantoms, a skull wearing a cavalry hat with crossed pistols underneath. We'd bled together, buried brothers together, went to war together. But the look on their faces now? That was fear mixed with something uglier. Suspicion. What about the truck stop cameras? Doc asked. Our secretary was a former Army medic who could stitch a man up or hack a computer with equal skill. Conveniently down for maintenance, Chains spat. Owner said they've been out for a week. Bullshit, if you ask me. The Diablos, Trigger said from the far end of the table. Our vice president was built like a brick shithouse and had the temperament to match. They're the only ones who knew we were coming through. Maybe they decided to renegotiate terms permanently. I called their president, I said. Snake swears on his mother's grave they had nothing to do with it. Said Reaper never made it to the meet and they figured we'd stood them up. And you believe him? Trigger's jaw was set hard as granite. I believe that starting a war with the Diablos without proof is a quick way to get more brothers killed. I stood, planting both hands on the table. But I also believe someone knows what happened to Reaper. And I'm going to find out who, even if I have to burn this whole state to the ground. The brothers nodded, but I could see it in their eyes. The question nobody wanted to ask, but everybody was thinking, what if it was one of us? The next morning, I took Chains and our intelligence officer, a skinny, tweaker-looking kid we called Weasel, back to the truck stop. The place was a standard roadside dump. Diesel pumps out front, a diner that probably gave you food poisoning just from looking at the menu, and a parking lot that had seen better days sometime around the Nixon administration. The owner was a fat man named Eddie who wore grease-stained overalls and the expression of practiced ignorance. He repeated the same story. Cameras broken, didn't see nothing, didn't hear nothing. His hands shook when he talked, though, and his eyes kept darting to the semi-trucks idling on the far side of the lot. "Eddie," I said quietly, stepping close enough that he had to crane his neck to look up at me. "I'm going to give you one chance to tell me the truth. Did you see what happened to my brother?" "I told you, I don't know nothing." I grabbed a fistful of his overall straps and pulled him up on his toes. "Wrong answer. See, the thing about lies is they're like rust. Once they start, they spread. And I don't have time for rust, Eddie. So you're going to tell me what really happened, or I'm going to let my associate here have a conversation with you in the back room. And Weasel? He's not as patient as me." Weasel grinned, showing teeth that had seen too much meth and not enough dentistry. It was all theater. Weasel was actually a decent kid who'd never hurt a fly, but Eddie didn't know that. All right. Eddie's face had gone pale as old snow. "There were men. 3 of them, maybe 4. I didn't see their faces, they had bandanas up. But they were waiting, like they knew someone was coming." "What kind of men?" Chains demanded. "I don't know, man. They had these tattoos like Mexican style, you know? Skulls and saints and shit. They rolled up in a black Escalade about an hour before your buddy showed. Paid me $500 cash to make myself scarce and kill the cameras. Said if I talked, they'd kill my family." Eddie was sweating now, the truth pouring out like water from a broken dam. "I got a daughter in middle school, man. I got a wife. What was I supposed to do?" I released him and he stumbled back against the counter. "Did they say anything? Any names? Any indication of who sent them?" "Just one thing," Eddie said, his voice barely a whisper. "When they were leaving, I heard one of them on the phone. He said something in Spanish, then he laughed and said, 'El Tigre sends his regards.' That's it, I swear." Back on the bikes, Chains looked at me with murder in his eyes. "El Tigre, that's Sinaloa cartel. What the hell does a Mexican cartel want with Reaper?" "I don't know," I said, firing up my Harley. The engine roar was like thunder, drowning out the wind and my thoughts. "But I'm going to find out." That night, the clubhouse was packed. Word had spread through the motorcycle community like wildfire. The Iron Phantom's sergeant-at-arms was missing, and there were whispers of cartel involvement. Brothers from support clubs showed up to offer their help. Old ladies, the wives and girlfriends of members, brought food and tried to keep spirits up, but there was a darkness hanging over everything. I stood at the bar nursing a whiskey when I felt a hand on my shoulder. Turning, I found myself looking at Sarah Chen, Reaper's old lady. She was a tough woman, Chinese-American, former Marine who could outshoot half the club. But right now, her eyes were red-rimmed and her hands shook as she held a beer. "Anything?" she asked. I wanted to lie, to give her hope, but we didn't do that in this life. "Cartel might be involved. We're working leads." "Cartel?" Her voice went sharp as a knife. "What the fuck would a cartel want with Marcus?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." I studied her face. "Sarah, was Reaper into anything? Anything outside club business that might have put him on someone's radar?" She bristled. "You asking if my man was dirty?" "I'm asking if he was in trouble. There's a difference." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming against her beer bottle. Finally, she said, 3 weeks ago, Marcus came home at 4 in the morning. Had blood on his hands, not his own. When I asked what happened, He said it was club business and to let it go. But he was different after that. Distant. Like something was eating at him. Did he say anything else? Any names, any details? Just one thing. Sarah met my eyes. He said if anything ever happened to him, I should tell you to check his storage unit. Number 42 at that place off Route 89. Said you'd know what to do. My blood ran cold. Reaper had never mentioned a storage unit. Never mentioned being in trouble. The fact that he'd given Sarah contingency instructions meant he knew something bad was coming. Give me the key, I said. She pulled a small brass key from her pocket and pressed it into my palm. Find him, Prez, or find who took him. Marcus always said you were the only brother he'd trust with his life. Don't let him down. An hour later, Trigger, Doc, and I stood outside Storage Unit 42. The facility was one of those self-storage places that dotted the highway, mostly used by people storing RVs and boats during the off-season. At midnight, it was deserted except for the security lights casting long shadows across the pavement. I slid the key into the lock and the door rolled up with a metallic screech that set my teeth on edge. Inside was something I never expected to see. Files. Dozens of them, organized in neat rows on metal shelving. But these weren't club files. As I started pulling them down and flipping through, my stomach dropped. Holy shit, Doc breathed, reading over my shoulder. These are cartel records. Bank accounts, shipment routes, contact names. This is enough to bring down half of the Sinaloa operation in the Southwest. Why would Reaper have these? Trigger demanded. I kept reading, my mind racing. Then I found it, a folder marked El Tigre in Reaper's handwriting. Inside were surveillance photos of a man in his 50s, expensive suit, cold eyes. Notes in Reaper's precise script, detailed movements, associates, properties. And at the bottom, a single sentence that made everything click into place. El Tigre ordered the hit on President Sullivan. Have proof. Will bring to club when ready. President Sullivan. My father. Jesus Christ, I whispered. Reaper knew who killed my old man. He's been investigating for 3 years, and he finally found proof. Which means El Tigre found out, Trigger said grimly, and took Reaper before he could expose him. I was about to respond when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. President Iron Phantoms, a smooth voice said, accent thick but English perfect. I believe you have been looking for your sergeant at arms. I have information about his situation, but it will cost you. Who the fuck is this? A concerned party. Meet me at the Crossroads bar in Casper tomorrow at noon. Come alone. If I see other bikers, your sergeant at arms dies. If you bring police, he dies. If you do not show, he dies. Do we understand each other? The line went dead before I could answer. Doc and Trigger were staring at me. What was that about? Doc asked. Someone claiming to have information about Reaper, I said, my mind already racing through scenarios. Wants to meet tomorrow, alone. Bullshit, you're going alone, Trigger said. That's a setup if I ever heard one. Maybe, I admitted. But if there's even a chance Reaper's alive, I have to take it. I looked back at the storage unit, at the evidence of my brother's secret investigation, at the proof that our own Brotherhood had been infiltrated by cartel interests deep enough to kill a president. And I knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. Because if the cartel could get to Reaper, the toughest, most careful man I'd ever known, they could get to anyone. The question was, who else in the Iron Phantoms were they already reaching? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my father's old office behind the bar, surrounded by photographs of brothers who'd ridden before us, some dead, some in prison, all of them loyal to the end. Or so I'd thought. The Crossroads bar sat on the edge of Casper, a dive that catered to oil workers and drifters passing through. Neutral ground, technically, but that didn't mean shit if someone wanted you dead. I'd been in this life long enough to know that Alone was relative. Trigger and Chains would shadow me from a distance, and Weasel would be monitoring traffic cameras and cell signals from his laptop back at the clubhouse. But first, I had calls to make. At 6 a.m., I phoned Samuel Rivera, a DEA agent I'd worked with during that ugly business with the meth cooks 2 years back. Sam was one of the few feds who understood that outlaw clubs weren't all the same. Some of us had codes, lines we wouldn't cross. He picked up on the third ring, voice rough with sleep. "This better be good, Iron." That's what he called me. Just Iron, like the club name was my first name and I didn't have another. Maybe he was right. "I need information about a cartel player. Goes by El Tigre, Sinaloa operation." There was a long pause. "Why are you asking about Rafael Mendoza?" "So that's his real name." I filed that away. "Because I think he had my sergeant-at-arms kidnapped, and I think he killed my father 3 years ago." Jesus Christ. I heard Sam moving around, probably getting coffee. "Iron, listen to me very carefully. Rafael Mendoza is not someone you fuck with. He's third in command of the Sinaloa cartel's northern operations. The man has killed federal witnesses, judges, entire families. If he's got your guy is already dead." "Maybe, but I got a call last night from someone claiming to have information. Meeting them at noon." "Don't." Sam's voice was sharp now, fully awake. "That's a trap. They'll kill you or grab you for leverage. Either way, you're done." "You got a better idea?" Silence. Then, "Let us handle it. Give me what you have, and we'll bring Mendoza down legally." I almost laughed. "How'd that legal approach work out for those federal witnesses you mentioned? The ones Mendoza killed?" "That's not fair." "No. What's not fair is that my brother is missing, my father is dead, and the man responsible is still breathing. So I'm going to that meeting, Sam. Question is whether you want to help or stay out of my way." Another long pause. Finally, Sam sighed. "What do you need?" "Everything you have on Mendoza. Associates, properties, weaknesses, and I need it in the next 4 hours. You're going to start a war." "A war's already started," I said. "I'm just finishing it." The files Sam emailed over painted a picture of a monster. Rafael El Tigre Mendoza had started as a sicario, an assassin, for the Sinaloa cartel in the 90s. By 2010, he'd clawed his way up to regional command, controlling drug routes from Mexico through the Southwest and up into Montana and Wyoming. His signature was brutality. He'd once dissolved an entire rival crew in barrels of acid as a message. He had connections everywhere: cops, politicians, even some federal agents. The man was a ghost who left bodies in his wake, but there was one interesting detail buried in the files. Mendoza had a nephew, Carlos, who'd been arrested 6 months ago in Cheyenne on weapons charges. The kid was sitting in county jail awaiting trial, and according to Sam's notes, he was Mendoza's favorite relative. The son El Tigre never had. That was leverage. Maybe the only leverage we had. At 11:30, I rode out to Casper alone. My Harley roared beneath me, the familiar vibration a comfort as the highway unspooled. I'd strapped my .45 in a shoulder holster under my leather jacket and had a backup piece in my boot. Not that guns would help much if this was a setup, but dying armed was better than dying helpless. The Crossroads bar looked exactly like you'd expect: weathered wood siding, neon signs advertising cheap beer, a parking lot full of pickup trucks and a few dusty motorcycles. I pulled in at 5 minutes to noon and killed the engine. The sudden silence was oppressive. Inside, the bar was dark and smelled of stale beer and cigarette smoke from before the smoking ban, the scent soaked so deep into the wood it would never leave. A handful of day drinkers sat at the bar, and a lone figure occupied a booth in the back corner. He was young, maybe 30, with the lean build of a runner and the nervous energy of a man who knew he was playing with fire. When I approached, he looked up with dark eyes that had seen too much. "You're the president," he said, not a question. And you're the man who called. I slid into the booth across from him, keeping my hands visible but ready. Start talking. My name is Miguel. I worked for El Tigre. His accent was thick, words carefully chosen. I was there when they took your sergeant at arms. My heart hammered, but I kept my face neutral. Keep going. It was a setup from the beginning. El Tigre knew your man was investigating him. He has people everywhere, cops, judges, even inside your club. Someone told him about the run to Casper, about Reaper riding sweep. They were waiting at that truck stop for 3 hours before you showed. Who inside my club? I demanded, leaning forward. Miguel shook his head. I don't know the name. El Tigre keeps that close. But I can tell you this. Your sergeant-at-arms is alive. For now. El Tigre is holding him at a ranch outside of Laramie. He's been questioning him. Wants to know what evidence Reaper collected. Who else knows? The relief that Reaper was alive warred with the horror of what questioning meant. I'd seen cartel torture before. It was an art form designed to break men slowly. Why are you telling me this? I asked. What do you want? My family. Miguel's hands were shaking now. El Tigre has my wife and daughter in Mexico. He's holding them to ensure my loyalty. But I can't do this anymore. I can't watch him hurt people, kill people. I want out. I want my family safe. You help me, I help you get your man back. It was a risk. Miguel could be another layer of the trap, leading me into an ambush. But something in his eyes, the desperation, the exhaustion, felt real. Tell me about the ranch, I said. 2 hours later, I was back at the clubhouse with the full weight of the club's leadership around me. Miguel's information had been detailed. The ranch was an isolated property 40 miles outside Laramie, registered to a shell company but clearly a cartel safe house. 6 to 8 guards at any time, rotating shifts. Reaper was being held in a converted barn. El Tigre himself was there, personally overseeing the interrogation. It's suicide, Doc said flatly, looking at the satellite imagery we'd pulled up. Even if we roll in with every brother we've got, they'll cut us down before we get through the gate. So we don't go through the gate, I said. We hit them quiet. Small team, night insertion, in and out before they know what's happening. You sound like fucking special forces, Trigger muttered, but he was studying the maps with interest. We'd need someone who knows the layout, someone on the inside. We've got Miguel, I said. He's worked there, knows the guard rotations, the blind spots in their security. Chains spoke up from his position by the door. And we trust this guy, why? For all we know, El Tigre sent him to lead us into a kill box. That's a risk, I admitted. But it's the only play we've got. Reaper's alive right now, but he won't be for long. Every hour we wait, El Tigre gets closer to breaking him or just deciding he's not worth keeping alive. What about the rat? This from Junkyard, the youngest member. His voice was quiet, but everyone heard it. Someone in this club sold Reaper out. Someone gave El Tigre the information about our run. Until we know who, we can't trust anybody. The room went cold. Brothers exchanged glances, that old suspicion rising again like smoke. I stood, commanding their attention. Here's how this is going down. Trigger, Chains, Doc, and me. We're the extraction team. Weasel stays here running communications and monitoring police bands. Everyone else provides security and backup at designated points. Nobody outside this room knows the plan until we're rolling. Nobody. And if it is a trap? Trigger asked. Then we go down fighting, I said simply. But we're not leaving Reaper to die alone. That's not who we are. That's not what this patch means. I tapped the Iron Phantom's emblem on my chest. We're brothers, and brothers don't abandon each other, ever. One by one, the men around the table nodded. Whatever doubts they had, whatever fears, the code held. It always had. It had to, or we were nothing but thugs in matching jackets. We spent the rest of the day prepping. Weapons were cleaned and loaded. Pistols, shotguns, even an AR-15 that Doc had modified for close quarters. We reviewed Miguel's intel a dozen times, memorizing every detail of the ranch layout. Weasel hacked into the local power grid to give us the option of cutting electricity if needed. Chains reached out to friendly clubs along the route, setting up safe houses in case we needed to go to ground. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the clubhouse parking lot, Sarah Chen found me checking my bike one final time. "You're going after him tonight," she said, not a question. "Yeah." She was quiet for a moment, watching the way the dying light reflected off my chrome. "Marcus always said you were the best of us, that you had your father's strength but your mother's heart. That's why the club chose you as president when you were barely 30. I didn't know what to say to that. "Bring him home," Sarah said, her voice cracking, "or don't come back at all. Because if Marcus dies and you live, I don't know if I could forgive that, and I don't know if you could either." She walked away before I could respond, leaving me alone with the weight of her words and the darkness closing in. At midnight, we rolled out. 4 bikes cutting through the Wyoming night, headlights carving tunnels through the darkness. Miguel rode on the back of my bike, his arms wrapped tight around my waist. The highway was empty, just us and the endless prairie and the stars overhead like bullet holes in a black tarp. We killed our headlights a mile from the ranch and coasted to a stop behind a stand of cottonwood trees. The ranch spread before us like something out of a Western movie. Main house, barn, outbuildings, all surrounded by a fence that was more decorative than functional. Lights blazed in the windows of the house, and I could see the glow of cigarettes where guards stood watch. 2 at the main gate, Miguel whispered, pointing. 2 more roaming the perimeter. Inside, usually 3 in the house and at least 1 in the barn with the prisoner. El Tigre will be in the house, probably in the study on the 2nd floor. 8 total, maybe 9, Doc said. Bad odds. "We've faced worse," Trigger rumbled. "Remember that mongrel clubhouse in Texas?" "Yeah, and we barely made it out of that alive," Chains muttered. I checked my watch. 12:47 a.m. "Chains, you and Trigger take the roaming guards, quiet as you can. Doc, you're with me. We go in through the barn's back entrance, grab Reaper, and extract. Everyone meets back here in 20 minutes. If something goes wrong, scatter and regroup at the safe house in Cheyenne. Clear?" Nods all around. We synchronized watches, checked weapons one last time, and then melted into the darkness. Moving across the open ground felt like being naked. Every sound seemed amplified, the crunch of gravel, the whisper of wind through grass. My own heartbeat hammering in my ears, but we made it to the fence line without raising an alarm. Chains and Trigger split off, circling wide. I watched through binoculars as they stalked the roaming guards like ghosts. A brief scuffle, too quick to see details, and then Chains gave the all-clear signal. Doc, Miguel, and I approached the barn from the rear. Up close, I could see it was newer construction trying to look old, probably built specifically for the cartel's purposes. There was a small door set into the back wall, and Miguel produced a key. "Guard will be at the front entrance," he whispered. "Usually just one unless El Tigre is feeling paranoid. Your man is in the back stall." The key turned with a soft click, and the door swung open. Inside, the barn smelled of hay and copper. Blood. My eyes adjusted to the dim light from a single bulb hanging in the main area, and then I heard it. A voice I knew better than my own, rough and defiant even in pain. "Fuck you, and fuck El Tigre. I ain't telling you shit." Reaper. I moved forward, Doc covering my 6, and what I saw made rage bloom hot and violent in my chest. Reaper was chained to a support post, face swollen and bloody, one eye completely shut. His cut had been torn from him and thrown in the dirt, the ultimate disrespect. A cartel guard stood over him with a cattle prod, grinning. The guard never saw me coming. I crossed the distance in 3 strides and buried my knife in his kidney, twisting. He made a wet, gasping sound and dropped. I caught him before he hit the ground, lowering him silently as Doc moved to Reaper. "Jesus, Marcus," Doc breathed, pulling out bolt cutters for the chains. Reaper's good eye focused on us, and I saw the moment recognition hit. "Prez, what the fuck are you doing here?" "Rescuing your ungrateful ass," I said, helping support him as Doc cut the last chain. "Can you walk?" "Can I walk? Can I? You cocky little shit." But there was relief in his voice and something else. Fear. "It's a trap. They knew you'd come. El Tigre?" The barn lights blazed to full brightness. I spun, gun already coming up, but there were too many. A dozen cartel soldiers poured through both entrances, weapons trained on us. And walking calmly through the main door came a man in an expensive suit, gray hair perfectly styled despite the late hour. Rafael Mendoza, El Tigre. "President Iron Phantoms," he said, his English perfect and accent cultured. "How predictable you are." Miguel played his part beautifully, didn't he? I looked at Miguel, who couldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "My family is already dead," El Tigre said casually. "I killed them 3 days ago." But Miguel didn't know that, did he? He still had hope. Hope is such a useful tool. "You fucking monster," I started, but El Tigre raised a hand and his men tensed. Now, you're in no position for moral judgments. You and your sergeant-at-arms cost me a great deal of trouble. The evidence he collected, the investigation he ran, very thorough, very professional. It took significant effort to discover what he knew. And now you've brought me exactly what I wanted, the president of the Iron Phantoms. With you dead, your club falls apart. Without your club's protection, I control every drug route from here to the Canadian border. Others will come, Doc said. You can't kill all of us. Can't I? El Tigre smiled. By morning, the sheriff will find your bodies here, along with evidence that you were attempting to rob my ranch. A tragic miscalculation, self-defense, clearly. And the mole I have in your club will ensure the surviving members get the message. Cross me and die. Who? I demanded. Who's the rat? El Tigre just smiled. Kill them. Make it slow. The soldiers raised their weapons, and I knew we were out of time and options. This was how it ended. Not on the highway or in some glorious last stand, but in a barn in the middle of nowhere, betrayed and outgunned. Then the barn exploded. The explosion came from the house, a massive fireball that lit up the night and sent debris raining down. In the moment of chaos that followed, I dropped and rolled, firing blind. Doc did the same, and somehow we made it behind a stack of hay bales as bullets tore through the air where we'd been standing. "What the hell was that?" Doc shouted over the gunfire. "No idea, but I'll take it." Through the smoke and chaos, I saw Trigger burst through the barn's side door with a shotgun, Chains right behind him with the AR-15. They'd blown the propane tank at the house. Crazy bastards. And now they were taking full advantage of the confusion. Trigger's shotgun roared and 2 cartel soldiers went down. Chains worked the AR like a surgeon, precise 3-round bursts that forced El Tigre's men to take cover. It gave us the opening we needed. "Reaper, move!" I grabbed our sergeant-at-arms and half-dragged him toward the back exit. Doc laid down covering fire while Miguel, that duplicitous bastard, cowered in the corner, crying. We burst out into the night air, the house fully engulfed now, flames reaching toward the stars. Men were screaming, vehicles were exploding as the fire spread. It was beautiful chaos. But El Tigre wasn't done. I heard his voice cutting through the mayhem. "Kill them! All of them!" We ran for the tree line, bullets kicking up dirt around our feet. Reaper was stumbling but fighting to keep up, one arm draped over my shoulders. Chains and Trigger provided rear guard, stopping every few seconds to fire back. We'd almost made it to the trees when Reaper went down, taking me with him. For a horrible second, I thought he'd been shot, but he was pointing back at the barn, his face twisted with rage. "The cut!" he gasped. "My fucking cut! I can't leave it! Are you insane? It's just leather. It's everything." Reaper tried to get up, to go back. "My colors, man! My whole life is on that cut. I can't—" Doc grabbed him. "Marcus, you stubborn son of a bitch, we are not dying over a jacket." But I understood. In this life, the cut wasn't just clothing. It was identity, history, every road you'd ridden and every brother you'd lost. Leaving it was like leaving a piece of your soul. "I'll get it," I said. "Get him to the bikes." "Prez, no." I was already moving, sprinting back toward the barn. It was suicide, and I knew it, but some things mattered more than survival. Some things were worth dying for. The barn was chaos, the firefight still raging. I saw El Tigre's men regrouping, getting organized despite the carnage. I slipped through the smoke like a ghost, finding Reaper's cut where it had been thrown in the dirt. I grabbed it, clutching it to my chest like the sacred relic it was. That's when I saw him. Carlos Joker Martinez, my road captain for the northern chapter. The man I'd trusted with my life, who'd ridden beside me for 5 years. He was standing with El Tigre, a radio in his hand, coordinating with someone. When he saw me, his face went pale. "Joker?" I couldn't process it. What are you doing?" "I'm sorry, Prez." His voice was thick with something that might have been regret. "They have my daughter, my little girl. El Tigre said if I didn't cooperate, he'd—" "So you sold out Reaper? You sold out the club?" "I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice." The betrayal hit me harder than any bullet could. "You could have come to us. We could have helped. Instead, you became a rat." El Tigre laughed from behind his men. Touching, but ultimately meaningless. "Carlos, kill him." Joker raised his pistol, his hand shaking. I could see the war in his eyes, loyalty versus fear, brotherhood versus blood. For a long moment, we just stood there, two men who'd been brothers facing each other across an impossible divide. Then Joker turned and shot El Tigre. The cartel boss went down, blood blooming across his expensive suit. His men froze in shock, and in that heartbeat of hesitation, Joker screamed, "Run!" I ran. Bullets chased me across the ranch yard, but I made it to the trees. Behind me, I heard Joker's gun firing again and again until it ran dry. Then silence. Then the answering roar of cartel weapons. At the bikes, the others were waiting. Trigger had to physically restrain Reaper from going back for Joker. I shoved the cut at him. "He saved us," I said, my throat tight. "Joker saved us. Now let's not waste it." We mounted up and rode. Behind us, the ranch burned like a funeral pyre, and I knew we'd left more than just bodies in that barn. We'd left innocence, trust, the illusion that brotherhood was absolute. 3 days later, we gathered at the cemetery on the edge of town. The Iron Phantoms, what was left of us, standing in a rough circle around 2 graves. One was marked for Joker, though we'd never recovered his body. The other was empty, waiting for whoever fell next. Reaper stood beside me, still bandaged but alive. The doctor said he'd been hours away from dying when we pulled him out. His cut was draped around his shoulders. Tears in the leather, but still bearing our colors. "I fucked up," he said quietly. "Going after El Tigre alone, not trusting the club with what I'd found. I thought I was protecting everyone, but all I did was paint a target on my back." "We all fucked up," I said. "I should have seen Joker was in trouble. Should have known something was wrong." "He died a brother," Chains said from my other side. "Made the choice that mattered in the end." News had filtered through the biker community over the past 72 hours. El Tigre had survived Joker's shooting but was critically wounded, his operation in chaos. The feds had swooped in with the evidence from Reaper's storage unit, bringing RICO charges against half the cartel's command structure. Our father's murder would finally see justice. But the cost. Jesus, the cost. Sarah Chen stepped forward, placing flowers on Joker's memorial. "We have to be better," she said, her voice carrying to all of us. "This club, this brotherhood, it only works if we trust each other, if we carry each other's burdens. Joker died because he was afraid to ask for help. Reaper nearly died for the same reason. How many more brothers do we lose before we learn?" She was right. The code we lived by, loyalty, brotherhood, the club above all, it only worked if we actually lived it. Not just the glory parts, the riding and the parties and the reputation, but the hard parts too, the vulnerability, the trust. I looked at the faces around me, Doc, Chains, Trigger, Weasel, Junkyard, 24 others. Good men, most of them. Flawed, sure. Products of hard roads and harder choices. But mine, my brothers. "Things change starting today," I said, my voice carrying across the cemetery. "No more secrets, no more lone wolves. If you're in trouble, family trouble, money trouble, any kind of trouble, you bring it to the club. We face it together. That's what this patch means. Not just riding together on sunny days, but carrying each other through the dark." "What about the cartel?" Trigger asked. "They're not going to forget what we did." "Let them come." Reaper's voice was hard as iron. "We're not hiding anymore. We're not running. This is our territory, our people, our home. Any cartel soldier who wants a piece of the Iron Phantoms knows where to find us." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. We were bloodied, yes. Mourning, absolutely. But not broken, not defeated. That night, back at the clubhouse, I sat in my father's chair and pulled out the last piece of evidence from Reaper's investigation. It was a photograph, grainy but clear enough. My father outside the Reno clubhouse, the second before the sniper's bullet found him. And in the background, barely visible in a parked car, a face I now recognized. El Tigre, watching, waiting, making sure the job was done. I'd spent 3 years wondering why. Why target the Iron Phantoms? Why kill a man who'd built one of the most respected clubs in the West? Now I knew. My father had discovered the cartel's plans to move into Wyoming, to turn our highways into drug corridors. He'd planned to stop them, to rally the other clubs and push back. So they'd killed him. Made it look random, like bad luck or bad timing. But my old man had taught me something important. Nothing's ever really random in this life. Everything's connected, every choice rippling out like stones in water. He'd made his choice to stand up to the cartel. Joker had made his choice to save us in the end. Reaper had made his choice to investigate alone. Now it was my turn to choose. I could play it safe, rebuild the club quietly, stay under the cartel's radar. Or I could finish what my father started. Make the Iron Phantoms a force that stood for something more than just brotherhood, a shield for the people and communities the law couldn't or wouldn't protect. The door opened, and Reaper limped in, 2 beers in hand. He passed me one and dropped into the chair across from me, wincing at the movement. "Heard you thinking all the way across the clubhouse," he said. "Yeah? Yeah. You got that look your old man used to get, like you're about to do something noble and stupid." I had to laugh. "Maybe a little of both. Whatever you're planning, Prez, I'm with you. We all are." Reaper raised his beer. "To the brothers we've lost, and to making damn sure they didn't die for nothing." "To the Brotherhood," I said, clinking my bottle against his, "and to the long road ahead." We drank in silence, the weight of everything that had happened settling over us like snow. Outside, I could hear the rumble of motorcycles as brothers arrived for church, our regular meeting. Life went on. The club went on. But we were changed, tempered by fire and blood and betrayal, harder maybe, wiser definitely, and absolutely certain that the patch on our backs meant something worth fighting for. The iron had been tested, and it had held. 2 weeks later. The sun was setting over the Wyoming prairie, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked like fire. I stood at the edge of the clubhouse parking lot, watching the highway stretch toward the horizon. A truck pulled up, dusty and nondescript. The passenger door opened and a woman stepped out, early 40s, tired eyes, holding the hand of a little girl, maybe 7 years old. "You Iron Phantoms?" the woman asked, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd traveled a long way with hope as her only luggage. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "How can we help you?" "My name is Maria Martinez. This is my daughter, Rosa. We were Carlos's family." "Joker!" My heart clenched. "I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am. Joker died a hero, saved a lot of lives." Tears streamed down her face. "El Tigre told him we were in danger, made him believe we'd die if he didn't cooperate. But Carlos got us out, sent us away before everything happened. And before he died, he sent me a message. Said if anything happened to him, to come here. Said the Iron Phantoms would protect us." I looked at this woman and her daughter, refugees from a war they never asked to be part of. Joker's final act of love, of trust in the Brotherhood he'd betrayed and then saved. "He was right," I said. "You're under our protection now, both of you, for as long as you need." Sarah Chen appeared at my shoulder, drawn by some sixth sense. She looked at Maria and Rosa, and understanding passed between the two women, both of them knowing what it meant to love a man in this life, to lose him to the violence we courted every day. "Come on," Sarah said gently, putting an arm around Maria. "Let's get you settled. Rosa, honey, are you hungry?" As they walked toward the clubhouse, little Rosa turned back to look at me. "Are you really going to keep us safe?" she asked, her voice small but steady. "Yes," I said. "That's what family does." She smiled then, just a little, and let Sarah lead her away. Reaper rolled up on his bike, killed the engine. He'd been watching the whole thing. "Taking in strays now, Prez?" "They're not strays," I said. "They're family. Joker's family." "Your old man would be proud," Reaper said after a moment. "Building something more than just a club, building a real brotherhood." "We all built it," I said. "Every brother who ever wore this patch. The ones who rode clean, and the ones who fucked up, and the ones who died protecting what we believe in. We're all part of it." More bikes were rumbling up the road now, brothers coming home from work, from runs, from wherever the day had taken them. One by one, they parked and walked into the clubhouse, slapping shoulders and exchanging greetings, the ritual of men who'd chosen this hard life together. Reaper stood, stretched carefully. "Church in an hour?" "Yeah, got some things to discuss, plans to make." "Always plans with you?" But he was grinning. "Just promise me one thing, Prez." "What's that?" "Next time I go missing, wait at least a week before launching a suicide rescue mission. All this getting tortured and almost dying really cuts into my beauty sleep." I laughed, genuine and hard, the first real laugh since this whole nightmare began. "Deal. But try not to get kidnapped again." "Yeah?" "I'll add it to my list of goals," Reaper said, heading inside. I stayed a moment longer, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Somewhere out there, the cartel was regrouping, planning their next move. Somewhere out there were brothers in other clubs facing their own battles, their own choices between honor and survival. But right here, right now, we had this. A clubhouse full of brothers, a family worth protecting, a code worth living by, and the knowledge that when the darkness came again, and it would, we'd face it together. I touched the patch on my chest, feeling the raised edges of the skull and crossed pistols. The Iron Phantoms, my father's legacy, my burden, my pride. The night our sergeant-at-arms went missing had changed everything, had tested us in ways I never imagined. We'd lost Joker, nearly lost Reaper, discovered betrayal in our own ranks. But we'd survived. And more than that, we'd remembered what mattered. Not the bikes or the reputation or the territory. Those were just symbols. What mattered was the man standing next to you when the bullet started flying. The brother who'd take a knife meant for you. The family you chose when the one you were born into let you down. That was the club. That was the code. That was everything. I turned and walked into the clubhouse, into the warmth and noise and brotherhood waiting inside. The road ahead would be long and dangerous and marked with more loss than I wanted to imagine. But we'd ride it together. All of us. Iron until the end. The end.